Good evening. This is another edition of Resource PNG. Tonight we take a look at how the second largest cash crop in PNG, coffee, has fared in years past to present, with this next report on the world coffee outlook, and get a first-hand perspective from international coffee expert Mick Wheeler. Coffee production in Papua New Guinea accounts for approximately 1% of world production. On the global scale, production and consumption over the last 15 years has been marked by both deficits and surpluses. And in terms of production, Robusta coffee is now taking a much bigger percentage of the world's production of Arabica coffee, as there's a stable demand for Robusta. There's also been a shift in power in terms of stocks, where consuming countries are now holding more stocks than producing countries. This is according to Mick Wheeler, an international expert in the coffee industry. Mr. Wheeler had worked in the country for 37 years, first as an agriculture economist and then as chief agriculture economist of the Department of Primary Industries. He now sits on a number of coffee advisory boards in Europe. Mr. Wheeler was a guest at a lunch hour seminar hosted by the Institute of National Affairs.
Supply and demand, the darker one is the production, the lighter blue is the consumption. And as you can see, we've had some years when we've had surpluses, some years when we've had deficits. But at the moment, in 2013, basically supply and demand were well matched. We actually had a balance between world supply and demand. That's next thing. This shows you production by type, and this is really important because I've divided between Arabica and Robusta. And if you look at the darker one, which is the Arabica, the bottom bit there, not too bad over the last, again, 15, 16 years. But what is interesting is the increase in Robusta production. Now, Robusta production is a lower quality production than Arabica, but as you can see, the proportion of the world's total production of coffee, Robusta is now taking a much bigger percentage of world production than Arabica. Just giving you a very quick, brief rundown on what's going on with world production. As you can see, Papua New Guinea produces about 1%, the rest of the world 9%, but the biggest one is Brazil at 34%. Very interesting is Vietnam at 19%. That's about 29 million bags of coffee in 2013. And that's obviously going to be significant because they've gone from literally nothing in the early 1980s to 29 million bags in 30 odd years. Fantastic growth. Everybody, Paul mentioned the fact that I went to work with Vietnam in the late 1980s, and before I went to Vietnam, I asked around, so, well, how much coffee is Vietnam producing? And it was 40,000 bags, maybe 50,000 bags. So I was thinking, okay, I'm going to go to a really small industry. So I go there my first time, and when I get back, I say to everybody, you lot don't know what you're talking about. I reckon they're producing at least 1 million bags now. And by the turn of the century, they're going to be producing 5 million bags. And everybody laughed at me. Everyone thought I was stupid, didn't know what I was talking about. They all called me long. They said, oh, no, you don't. And as I say to them now, I did get it wrong, didn't I? I said, they didn't produce 5 million bags by year 2000. It was 15 million bags they were producing by then, and the world accepted the fact that I was right. Next slide, please. This is one I thought was up earlier. There we go. I wanted to show you the difference between services and things. As you can see, in the late 1990s to 2000, we had a lot of big surpluses. Those big surpluses forced prices way down. So in the early part of the turn of the century, from 2002 to 2006, we had extremely low prices, reflecting the fact we had this huge surplus of coffee overhanging the market. It was only really by the time we got to 2007, which was a big deficit, that prices really started to improve again. We got back into, and you will recall, prices on New York in that period there were below 50 cents per pound. And it was a really critical time for every world producer was facing the same problem. As you can see, we had a number of years of deficit, and then in 2012 we had a small surplus. And everyone thought, well, okay, and then in 2013, as I say, we're in balance again. And that's Now, next slide, please. The big thing is, well, so what happens to global stocks? Now this is, if you look at the far line one at the back of the dark blue one, that gives you total world stocks, and it gives you the idea. When we have a deficit, any deficit is made up from stocks. So any stocks we've had with a deficit, we draw down stocks. If we have a surplus, it adds to stocks. And the big issue here is, where are those stocks held? So if you look at the light blue, that shows you producing countries. That's when stocks were held in producing countries. So actually what we see is that, again, in 2002, 2003, when we had this huge oversupply in the market, producing countries were carrying quite large stocks. So they were carrying very large stocks. But as you can see, as we got down through to 2007, when prices started to improve again, producer stocks were declining. What's actually really interesting in the last 5 years is look at the stocks held in consuming countries, which is the green one there. It was fairly constant for the first sort of 10 years, and then it started to increase. And last year, there was as much stock held in consuming countries as there is in producing countries. Now this is important, because if a stock's held in the consuming country, it means it's immediately available for consumption. If it's held in a producing country, it means it's got to be shipped. And then you've also got to have the producing country agree to release those stocks. So what we've seen is it's been a shift in power, to a certain extent, to consumers. The more stocks they hold, the more they don't need to necessarily panic buy. So this is very, very important. This is what's actually happened to prices. Now, the composite is the average between the Arabica and the Robusta prices of the world market. But as you can see with Robustas hasn't shown the same sort of volatility that Arabica shows. The top line is the Arabica one. There you can see huge volatility, especially not during the low price period, of course, 2002 to 2007. Low prices, quite stable, not that much volatility. Once we get into situations where people are worried about supply and demand, and it primarily relates to Arabica, because as I showed you before, the amount of Robusta on the world market has been increasing, it's been fairly stable. So what we've seen is fairly stable demand for Robusta, and it's in the Arabica that we tend to see more volatility in the market. And so this graph shows that particularly well.
Coffee production in Papua New Guinea from 2008 to 2013 had varied, attributed to a number of factors. Mick Wheeler stated that this clearly shows that leading producers of coffee dictate the market a great deal. The value of coffee exports to PNG is what drives the economy of the country. Thus, when the prices are high, people benefit a great deal as they tend to have cash in their pockets, but suffer when coffee prices fall. More of this report after the break. Welcome back. Coffee production in PNG accounts for approximately 1% of world production. Between the years 2008 and 2013, coffee production had varied due to a number of factors. In this next segment, we look at how coffee really drives the internal economy. A reason why coffee is seen to really drive the internal economy is that many people are engaged directly in coffee farming, apart from other well-known cash crops such as oil palm, cocoa and copra. Only when we disaggregate the value of coffee exports as a percentage of all exports from PNG, then we can appreciate the benefit that coffee generates for coffee farmers and others in the internal economy value chain.
Let's have a look at the value of coffee exports to Papua New Guinea, and this is in terms of millions of US dollars. And again, as you can see, in 2010 and 11, and in also 2011-12, we got over almost $300 million from coffee. Quite significant amounts of money. However, let's look at the value of coffee exports as a percentage of all exports from Papua New Guinea. And now we see that actually we're quite small. Even in 2011, we only accounted for just over 5% of total exports from Papua New Guinea. And this in a way reflects, if you like, the way the politicians look at coffee, because they look at that and they realise that everything else is more valuable than coffee. Except what this graph does not show is how many people are dependent upon coffee. This is the important thing. So when we talk about coffee, we talk about coffee prices, we estimate that something like 50% of the households derive all or part of their income from coffee. It's this that's really the impact. This is, and I say to politicians, and I say to everybody, coffee is what drives the internal economy. This is what the internal economy depends upon. When prices are good, we see boom times in the internal economy. Everything else is effectively external stimuluses. Coffee is the one thing that gives you an internal stimulus to the internal economy. So it's important. Even though it might only be a small percentage of the overall, it's still very, very important.
The volatility in price of coffee is very much dictated by Brazil's coffee production. When Brazil's coffee production declines, then PNG farmers benefit from higher prices due to the deficit supply to the market. But with the increasing world demand for coffee, producing countries need to meet this demand. PNG could benefit from this by increasing production, which remains to be a challenge. According to Mick Wheeler, the world demand for coffee continues to increase every year. In year 2014 to 2015, world demand is estimated at around 148 million bags. And world production in 2014 to 2015 without Brazil is estimated at 98.5 million bags. So just to be in the balance, the world needs Brazil to produce at least 49.5 million bags.
World demand's been one of the real constants over the last 20 years. Every year, world demand has increased by 2 million bags per year, roughly. One year it might be 1.5, next year it might be 2.5, but over the last 20 years, we've seen 40 million bags being added to world consumption, and that's been almost constant. It hasn't changed, it's almost straight line, and that's what production has moved around a bit, but consumption has stayed roughly very, very constant. Now, if we look at world production without Brazil, so we take Brazil right out of the equation altogether, we know that the rest of the world is going to produce about 98.5 million bags. So if we want to balance supply and demand, then Brazil, the world needs Brazil to produce 49.5 million bags.
We'll be back with more when we return. You're with Resource PNG. According to international coffee expert Mick Wheeler, the demand for coffee continues to increase every year. In 2014 to 2015, the world demand estimated at around 148 million bags. Continuing with our report on coffee production, we look at why quality plays such an important role in the supply and demand equation. With the balance in supply and demand for coffee, another important issue that comes into the equation is quality. Furthermore, according to forecast, if Brazil produces only 40 million bags of coffee, the price will be much higher, averaging around $3 per pound. Or if it's 57 million bags, then prices will quickly retreat to average somewhere below $1.20 per pound. This clearly shows that leading producers of coffee dictate the market a great deal. And this is what Mick Wheeler has to say.
And even if it produces 49.5 million bags, it means we're in balance. The question is then, what's the quality of that coffee that's being produced? Is it good quality or bad quality? And that's what we'll see then is going to determine the price. If it's really good quality, which it shouldn't be, I can't say it's not going to be, but it shouldn't be because of the problems the coffee's gone through. It should be fairly poor quality. But if it's good quality, then prices will be lower. If it's very poor quality, then the good quality coffee will obviously go for a much higher price. If everybody's wrong and it actually is 40 million bags, then I would say to you the prices are going to average over $3 a pound. We're going to see a real spike in prices in August and September. You know, we can see really high prices coming around if it's 40 million bags. So if we go right to the lowest forecast, That's where we will be. However, if it's 57 million bags or anywhere close, then prices are going to drop to 120. So, and you know, if it's somewhere in between, who really knows? But I would say if it's round about 48 to 50 million bags, then we should average round about the $1.50 to $2 in that region. That's where we should be. And let's be honest, in Papua New Guinea, any price over $1.50 is a good price for our prices. Everyone will be happy with that price. And because, as I explained earlier on, next year's crop's going to be affected because the vegetative growth hasn't taken place. And if it hasn't taken place now, it will not take place in the next 6 months while they're harvesting. And it'll be, the flowering is only on the new wood. You won't be growing new wood now until next year. We know next year's crop's going to be affected. So we know that next year's also prices are going to be good next year. So we have this 2-year window of really good prices. You know, they should be really good. Now, I'd also say to you, we also know that's going to stimulate demand, production in other countries. So we will have lower prices, I don't know when, but 3, 4, 5, 6 years time, we're going to go back into a low price period. And that's the story to it. Although we're going to have a short period of really good prices, we will have low prices at some stage in the future. So this is not a complete turnaround, it's just a temporary situation, and this happens all the time in coffee. Coffee is known for short periods of high prices followed by long periods of low prices. And this is because it takes 3 to 5 years for a coffee tree to come into production. So people plant when prices are high. By the time it comes into production, coffee prices are low, and we've got this because everybody's increasing production.
In Western Europe, the consumption of coffee has changed a great deal. The consumption of coffee is now based on the value perception of coffee. Thus, the future coffee market for PNG and the rest of the world continues to look relatively bright, with strong growth of specialty coffee markets in Europe.
It is important to realise that at least a quarter, more than a quarter, of consumption of coffee in Europe is now consumed out of home. And that has changed quite significantly over the last 30 or 40 years, maybe not so much over 10 years. And I always give, and I've given it to many times, Chuck is now getting fed up with hearing it, but there is a change taking place, not only in Europe, but also around the world. And this is in value perception of coffee. When I ask my mother, I say to her, what is the price of coffee? And because we're in the UK, she'll say, oh, about £3 a packet down the supermarket. Then I say to my son, what's the price of coffee? He says, oh, about £3 a cup. Now, can you see there's a difference? He looks at coffee as being out of home. He drinks coffee from a coffee shop. So he thinks in terms of what's the price per cup. My mother's generation thinks in terms of price per pound or whatever they were going to buy. And this is a value perception change that we're seeing. We're seeing the younger generation, where, let's face it, future consumption demands, they look at coffee now in terms of per cup.
But with this window of opportunity for PNG, Mick Wheeler clearly articulates that the future for PNG coffee is meeting specialty market standards, which places a huge emphasis on quality. We'll be back with more right after these short messages. Thanks for staying with us. Specialty market standards will greatly determine the quality of world coffee production. In this next segment, international coffee expert Mick Wheeler speaks of the 2 requirements that meet these specialty market standards. Furthermore, Mr. Wheeler outlined 2 requirements that the specialty market is looking for, and these includes the physical characteristics of coffee and the story behind the coffee, which simply refers to the consumer's perception of where the coffee comes from.
Quality is dependent on 2 factors. Quality is dependent, first of all, on the physical characteristics of the coffee, and the second is the story behind the coffee. Because I challenge you you go back in your life and think, when was the best cup of coffee I ever drank? When was the best cup of coffee? When did I taste the best cup of coffee? And I bet you it was when you were first going out with one of your loved ones. You were looking at them in their eyes, and you're in a coffee shop, and you're more thinking about them than you are the coffee. You're thinking, this is perfect, this is nice. Oh, this is a good cup of coffee. Oh, is she beautiful? Is he lovely? So your mind is looking at combining the situation with the coffee that you're drinking. And it is all about perception. At the end of the day, this is what I'm trying to say. Coffee quality is very subjective. It's what you like. It's not what I like. I can tell you whether the coffee is good or bad. I can say this one's got off taste and this one's bad. But it's what you like that makes it. When people come to me and say, what's the best coffee in the world? I go, well, apart from Papua New Guinea, it's the one you like the best. That's really where it all comes from. And it really is important that people understand this. Perceptions are important. So, quality, so the exporters have been able to develop new markets for us in America, which is good, and they're selling a lot of our wine grades now and our better quality coffees to America. And we're not selling so much of our better quality coffees or our wine grades to Europe anymore. But if you look at this graph, which I'm now talking about single serve, that now gives us a great opportunity. Because with single serve, and I talked to my son about this, and I talked to younger age, people are more experimental. They don't mind tasting one cup of coffee from a strange, exotic location. They want to experiment. They want to taste coffees from all over the world. If you bought one big packet of Papua New Guinea coffee, you're stuck with that for the next week. In a shop, you go in there, you get one cup. If you didn't like it, okay, next day you'll try Ethiopian. You might try Brazilian, or you might try. But the point is, all of the people who are getting into this are trying to differentiate their products from mainstream, and they're doing it by using single origin and different, i.e. organic, certified, whatever. So it gives the story behind the company. Now this gives us great opportunity. We are an exotic location. We have some fantastic stories. We have fantastic images. We have some fantastic shade grown, bird friendly, Madman coffee, you name it, whatever you like to call it. We have all of these stories, and that gives perception to the coffee. So we have all of these things that we can combine into this. Roasters, and I brought the team of roasters from Europe here, and this is what they were looking for. They're looking for unusual, exotic coffees that they can offer their customers. But they want good quality. And so when I said 50% of it is physical quality, you can't ignore physical quality. Physical quality is important. If the coffee tastes lousy, it tastes lousy. No matter how good your story is, if it's lousy coffee, it's lousy coffee. People will reject it. And so it's important that we realise good quality coffee. This gives us a unique opportunity. We're in a unique opportunity situation where we can basically embrace these new trends, get involved in it, trying to differentiate our coffees from everybody else's, get out there, do a little bit of promotion, do a little bit of actually marketing of the coffee. This is where the future lies. And this is what I've been trying to say to everybody. There are some great opportunities. Prices are going to be good. We have a great opportunity to invest now in our industry. Investment is taking place. As you know, the CIC has got a big program on at the moment, funded by the World Bank, and we are going to be moving forward. But we've got to have all of the components in place for us to move forward, and that's the important.
Mr. Wheeler leaves a challenge for PNG, which is providing more innovative techniques to attract young people into coffee farming in order to sustain the coffee industry. This means that the coffee industry has to be rejuvenated by appropriated government interventions. Coupled with this is the need to produce quality coffee that can be marketable in the growing specialty market of Europe. According to Mr. Wheeler, if this is done right, then everybody in the coffee market value chain will benefit. That ends this edition of Resource PNG. If you have any comments or queries, do email us on this address, resourcepng@mtv.com.pg. Or to find out more, check MTV online, that's www.mtv.com.pg, and go to our Resource PNG page. Or you can check our page on Facebook. Thanks for your company. Bye for now.